pretty sure that this was my very first action movie. Lethal Weapon 1, the director's cut. Directed by Richard Donner and released in 1987. With a production budget of $15 million, a domestic take of $65 million, an international take of $55 million, for a worldwide total of $120 million, coming in with a profit of $105 million. Starring Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Gary Busey, and Mitchell Ryan. This is an iconic representation of the late 80s action movie scene. Nostalgia can be powerful and frequently inaccurate. Okay, so let's talk about characters. Well, let's be honest, it's a two-person movie. It's Riggs and it's Murtaugh, and that's about it. I mean, the villain's okay. Busey does a great job as Mr. Joshua. He's quite a threatening psycho. I really actually like him. As a throwaway villain, he's one of the best throwaway villains you'll see in this kind of genre, or particularly in the late 80s. It's also nice to see He Who Is in Everything once again. Anyway, like I said, Riggs and Murtaugh, they are the only characters in this film that any real effort or work was put into, to be quite honest. I suppose the closest you come to the... Well, no, actually, there is no other one. No, that is it. You got Riggs, he's your very damaged former Special Forces operative. He's your marksman, he's your martial artist. He's the wild card lunatic with a gun. There's only, 7 extra minutes in this director's cut? Hang on. Sorry. With over 7 extra minutes. And it feels like about 5 of those minutes are dedicated to Riggs, showing you the depth of his character, the depth of his mental injuries, and just the lengths he'll go to, on one hand, try to die, and on the other hand, stay alive. Very nice flip side sort of character there. Then you got Murtaugh, and I actually like Murtaugh more than I liked Riggs in this series. He was always just the straight man. He's the guy having to deal with the fallout of his partner's decisions, and I've always enjoyed watching him just trying to cope with that. Riggs and Murtaugh, and in fact, are one of the highlights of the 80s, even the 90s action scene. They are something special. The other one being Detective McClane from the Die Hard series. We'll get to him in another review. This is the template for that style of thing. This is, to me, where the buddy cop banter all began. Because like I said, I think this was my very first action movie that I ever saw. I think it was a sneaky midnight viewing in an old VHS tape while everyone else was asleep, and I plugged the headphones into the TV so I didn't wake anyone else and I got get away with it. Pretty sure I didn't, but I thought I did. Mr. Joshua is interesting because he's the henchman who also happens to be really the primary villain for this movie. Whilst the general is the big bad guy pulling all the strings, it's Mr. Joshua that you see everywhere doing everything. So I consider him the main villain. Other than that, it's a small army of guys with guns, and their job is to get in the way, get beat up, and get shot. So as far as the score for characters goes, it's a little tricky, because 1, nostalgia, 2, these guys are iconic. The problem is they're really the only 2 good characters in the whole film. But then, I suppose they're meant to be the only standouts. This movie was primarily about them. So the question is, do the characters work for the film? And the answer is yes, definitely yes. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 3. I want to give it higher, but I need to rein in my nostalgia a little bit. This is going to be a long review. I'm overtired, I'm stuttering, I'm stammering, I'm falling over myself, and I'm trying to compensate with coffee. Oh boy. So, story. Well, I have to admit that this is the first time I've watched this film and actually been able to connect all the dots properly. When I first saw this story, I wasn't really paying attention to the story, of course. I was paying attention to the 2 cops bantering and bad guys getting shot. That's all I was watching. As a result, in my head, I could never have told you what this story was. I would not have any idea. But now I do. Thanks to all the connections that a bunch of special operatives have made in the heroin trade. You failed me. Thanks to their connections to the heroin trade in Vietnam. And it's got a lot of references to the Vietnam War in this movie. Not to mention Air America, which coincidentally Mel Gibson went on to star in a movie called Air America, 3 years later. Now all that goes wrong when one of the partners decides to come clean and go to the cops. Bad guys he's working for go and kill his daughter off. Due to the untidy nature of her demise, it ends up coming across the desk of the local cops. In particular, Sergeant Murtaugh, who is also a friend of the father of the daughter, who's tied up with the drug trade. And that's where it gets all untidy. Now, it introduces Riggs early on and shows that he's unstable, but he's kind of fearless. And they end up getting dragged in together into this one, end up having to put the pieces of the puzzle together and figure out what's going on. By the time they do figure out what's going on, the bad guys are upset. And bullets start flying, bodies start dropping, and it all goes very, very south. They kidnap Murtaugh's daughter and they try to kill Riggs in the street. In fact, they think they succeed. They didn't, and that gives them a bit of an edge. They go to do a swap, it turns into a bloodbath, nothing goes right, then all three are captured. It doesn't just go from here to here to here to here. It wanders around a little bit, and it keeps complex, it keeps you engaged, until the third act, which is very standard, escape and kill everybody. That's not a surprise. Getting to that point is the interesting part. At the end is just a nice little payoff. Now, whilst it is easy to say that we've seen all this before, this is the movie where I saw it the first time. And I've looked at a lot of action films before this movie, and none of them really quite did it this well. This was a bit of a gem. The movie-going public reacted accordingly. It was very popular, and it spawned quite a few sequels. Don't know if it was warranted that many sequels, to be honest. So story, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 3.25, mainly because it was really more complicated. There was more to it than it really needed to have in it. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. Look and feel. Okay, this is the difficult one. This is the one I have to try to remain objective or focused on the fact of when it was made and not be irritated by a whole bunch of things. Or I'll just list them off now because that's probably going to be easier. Audio quality is not good, okay? There are some scenes where you can almost hear when the characters are moving in between ranges on different microphones. It's got static and ambient crackle. It's got some nasty effects in there. There's artifacts in the audio. It was very distracting, actually. The musical score also, every now and then, gets a bit much. There's a couple of scenes where I'll actually hit mute just because I don't need this massive orchestral swell for a helicopter landing. I really don't. I'm not going to pick on the quality of the picture or the quality of the film because it was filmed in 1987. I will pick on the look and feel of the time. I did not like the 80s. The streets of, was it LA I think they're in? Ugly looking place in the 80s. Not nice. Nothing glamorous about that location. Everything's dirty concrete or crappy cars. Everything's got like ashtray deco. Everything looks like someone's been smoking in that room for too long. The other thing that makes me laugh about the old 80s movies is at the time, just needless nudity for no reason. You didn't need any of that. It didn't give you anything. Because like I watch all this other stuff now, you know, and the whole design ethos, the way that people make movies has changed a lot. And you watch enough of them, you start getting used to how it's done now. You go back to then and it's like, why are they doing that? I don't miss that at all. Having said those negative things, there are a couple of things I really do like about this style of filming. Helicopter flybys, long shots of cars going through the desert, or at night with just the illumination of the street lights and the headlights and neon signs. And it's all filmed on the ground with no extra lighting or whatever, or at least it doesn't look like there's extra lighting. Of course there is extra lighting, it's a film production, and I'm not a film producer, but I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff, so I do know, or at least I should know better than that statement. They got the hair and the wardrobe and the style of the time, which is generally untidy. I always like to mention Riggs' hair. No other reason than look at it. Look at it. It did pull you into the movie though. It did make you feel like you were sitting in the car with Riggs, or you're sitting in Murtaugh's home, or you're on the beat, or you're in the locations. Everything felt very real, very on set. You felt you were there. Just don't like the 80s as a setting. 70s or 90s, either side of it I'm happy with. Just the 80s. Can't stand it. Can't figure it out. Okay, so look and feel. I'm going to go and give this one a 2.5 for look and feel. That's pretty low. But I'm trying to be a little bit more aggressive, and I really don't like the 80s aesthetic. It annoyed me more than it really should have, more than it logically should have, I suppose. But at the same time, the audio was bugging me. Just, I gotta have clean audio in my movies. And this just wasn't there. Script and dialogue, okay. Wow, the 80s were a different time for filmmaking. They really were. Even in modern action movies these days, you just don't get half the language. But you go back to the 80s, man, they're just dropping it because it's casual conversation. It's like punctuation. It's almost grammatical swearing, you know? It's a shock if you haven't seen it for a long time. You just go like, oh, Oh, that's right, that was a thing. As I mentioned at the start, this is also the movie that introduced me to proper buddy cop banter. The back and forth, the witty dialogue, giving each other a hard time, teasing each other and other people, discussing the case, how the facts link, how they don't link, different theories, throwing all this around, back and forwards, being clever. I really, really enjoyed it. This is what introduced me to it. This is what I've come to expect from these sorts of movies and almost any movie now. If it's all serious business all the time, I'm really not interested. You've got to have a bit of wit, you've got to have a bit of repertoire, back and forth. Got to have some back and forth. Oh, and the exposition monster doesn't really make much of an appearance here. They don't hand you much on the plate. You get it at the end and snippets here and there, but you really have to make some assumptions. You have to put it together. You have to connect the dots as they're presented to you. Here's a funny thing. I'm not sure if this was planned foreshadowing, but the apartheid plays a major role in the plot for the sequel. Now, there is one sequence I want to talk about. It's the finale of the movie. It's a big old punch-up between Martin Riggs and Mr. Joshua. Pretty cool sequence. There's shaky cam, there's helicopter lights, there's water pouring down from a busted hydrant. It's muddy, it's bloody, it's brutal. It's a smackdown, drag out, fight to the finish. A great action scene finale. There's one thing that stood out to me, however, in pretty much every viewing of this movie. It's all the cops standing around watching Riggs and Joshua try to kill each other. And every time, I just can't not think about the fact that there's no way they'd let that happen. Kind of ruins the end scene for me because it's meant to be your finale. You're meant to be really cheering in there. But I just kept thinking, what are these cops doing? Why hasn't anyone stopped this? You know, surely there's another sergeant here. But that's just the way my brain works, so it's probably not fair for me to focus on that. I just found it weird. But score for script and dialogue. Look, it's pretty dodgy in some places, to be honest. It's got some just pointless stuff in there. But at the same time, it's also very, very well done in the banter department. And as I said, this is the film that introduced me to the buddy cop banter routine. So it holds a very special place. I'm going to go ahead and give this one, I'm going to have to leave it at a 3. As much as this was a launch point for a lot of the things I like in movies, it's also a lot of the things I don't like in movies anymore. So yeah, this is going to sit at a 3. Fun factor. Well, did I have fun? Yeah, I think I did. At the same time, I also think it was mainly nostalgia kicking in. Is it a movie I'm normally going to sit down and watch? No, it isn't. I've got it for the memories. Am I going to recommend this to anyone? If you've never seen it and you want to know where a lot of the modern tropes come from, then yeah, I'd recommend watching this one. If you want to sit down and watch a good action flick, I'd say go watch any of the Mission Impossible movies if that's what you wanted. So based on that, the score for Fun Factor is going to be coming in at a 2.75. I'll admit that it would have been a 2.5, except nostalgia kicked in, and nostalgia is a powerful thing. Okay, so final score. Add them all up, we get a 14.5. It's a product of its time and a perfect example of the late 80s action movie scene. Loved it for what it is, but I'm so glad we've moved along to bigger and better. And on that note, I think we're going to be working through the rest of this series just so we can compare as it develops. Have you seen the original Lethal Weapon movie? And when was the last time you saw it? Oh wow, come on. Anyhow, there's my review of Lethal Weapon 1. Thanks for joining me. Hope you've had a good time. Hope you're having a great week. I'd appreciate it if you left a comment, liked and subscribed. And as always, take care and find some time to watch a movie.